You feel the lift of wine in you. You feel the lift of wine in everyone. And you're all in agreement. Not to believe in love, but to want to. This you can do. You dance with a stranger and think, we have this in common, this wanting to believe. In what again? In the possibility that two people could actually make each other happy, not just today, but on 10,000 days they can't yet see.
Good.
Awesome. Yeah.
Can you tell us your name and what you do?
Yeah. My name's Leslie Jamison. I am a writer and a teacher.
Awesome. From your recent history, or even from many, many years ago, can you just tell us about one or two places that have been good physical places for you to actually write, where you've gotten some great work done?
Yeah. Honestly, the first place that came to mind, which makes me a little sad because I might never ever get to go there again or replicate these conditions, but I had a month in Marfa, Texas, in the western part of the state, just in the West Texas desert. I had a little house for a month, and I went there at a crazy moment in my own life because I had recently gotten married and become a stepmother, and so I was in this new domestic space that involved making school lunches and doing a lot of being at playgrounds on weekends. Girl, yeah, talking about domesticity. Yeah. And so I was navigating, I think, for the first time, but in this very 0 to 60 kind of way, going from being a single person with a lot of freedom to an unsingle person with much less freedom. And into that sort of space of craziness came this month in the desert where I was literally alone. And I went from being in a 1-bedroom New York City apartment where there was one desk in the entire apartment and the desk belonged to the 5-year-old to having this little house with a big desk. And I was at that point right at the kind of the midway point of working on a book, the 8-year process of working on a book, where I'd amassed all of this research and all of these notes, but I had no idea how to start turning that into an actual book with a structure and kind of map. And so it was actually perfect to have that space, because I could write down all the pieces of the book as I imagined them and literally spread them out on the floor. And there were maybe 55 or 60 pieces of paper. And just creating that visual map where I could wake up every day and get to work with that map in front of me would have been totally impossible in this crowded, crowded rent-controlled apartment in New York. And for me, it was really this intense manifestation of how space shapes the process, and having room to kind of not know what you're doing and room to literally spread out and try to map it for yourself, how those made certain kinds of things possible. And then when I had to leave, it felt a little easier to go back to the more cramped, literally, figuratively spaces I was in, because I had gotten in motion. I also think there's a particular kind of writing that happens when you have 2 hours to disappear, and another kind of writing that can happen when you have 16 hours to disappear, or you can stay up all night if you need to, or you can just go deep into the cave of it and not have to, nobody's gonna tug on your spelunking rope for a long, long time. And it was nice to just be able to kind of go into the cave of it pretty deeply there.
What do you see as the core needs of the students who are coming through your program right now? Obviously they're there to work and develop their craft and to hear from other perspectives, to grow as writers, as thinkers in the world. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of them getting a diploma and then hitting the streets in New York or wherever they end up, what are their anxieties and what are their hopes, and how can you actually put that bridge down to help to get them there?
Yeah. I mean, they're hungry to get published and anxious that they never will, and I think sometimes have a lot of shame about taking the conversation there, almost like they feel like they should only be talking to me about craft and aesthetics and the words on the page, and that it's almost like I can see this hesitation or this embarrassment about pivoting the conversation towards wanting to get published, or what does that look like, or where do I think their work might belong. And one of the things I try to do, because I think it's useful just on a deeper level, is to say, first of all, don't be embarrassed about this pivot, because wanting to be published isn't embarrassing. That desire is beautiful and intuitive and is not separate from the art. It's part of the art. To make the art and want it to be seen, it's all part of one cloth, right? So there's nothing shameful about wanting the conversation to hold that piece of it as well. And then I tell them, you're on your own finding an editor, but no, and then I also try to not just affirm it, but be useful and talk them through, most people who have found agents that they feel really good about, this is what the process has looked for them, and almost trying to get as granular and specific as possible, so as to say you shouldn't feel ashamed about caring about this. You shouldn't feel ashamed about not necessarily knowing. How would you know? How would you know how to place your first piece that ever gets published? How would you know how to get an agent? This is how it's almost like being part of this ecosystem where I've had predecessors and I'll have descendants, right? There were people who talked me through this process too, and I feel so grateful, not just for the knowledge they gave me, but for that feeling of being in community and that somebody cared enough to guide me. And so around a lot of that pragmatic career stuff, I also feel just a kind of a temporary vessel or something where the wisdom and the guidance came to me, and I kind of pay it forward or pass it along.
Final question. We are here at the Tuesday Agency in Iowa City, and if you were to give a guide to someone coming to Iowa City for the first or second or third time, is there a place that you would send them to say, you cannot miss this institution?
Oh my God,
this little
yes.
nook?
Yeah. This is an easy one for me because I have so much history with this place. But Deluxe Bakery on the south side of town on South Summit Street. It's this beautiful, bustling bakery. The woman, Jamie, who owns it and runs it, is born and raised in Iowa City, and walking around with her is kind of like walking around with the mayor, people are always pulling over in their cars to stop and talk to her. But I worked there for a couple years. When I would work my shifts, I got to know who was going to be there at a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., getting his sticky bun, and then so-and-so was going to come in a little later and try to write their novel, with a endless thing of black coffee, and just that it's really is that sense of this community spot where all these lives are unfolding over time, and it's a place that means a lot to me. So yeah, Deluxe.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending some moments with us here, with all of us here at the Tuesday Agency in Iowa City, and just talking about your process and how you're moving through the world. It's such an honor.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's so great to see you always, Andre, and wonderful to be here.